Welcome to another edition of Throwing Down Some Heavy Light. My name is Jamal Binding. I'm your host. What we're going to do today is we're going to have a special interview with Kamau N'Namdi, who's a resident of Texarkana, Arkansas. He grew up in Omaha, near the Omaha 21st and Sprague Street many years ago. He purchased a couple of lots near his childhood home, and ultimately he wanted to build a house in that area. Mr. N'Namdi shared with us that one of the things that he had to deal with the ordeal of dealing with the city over the years with his private property. These are empty lots. And he wanted to also give us a chance to share his stories. We know that he recently came back to Omaha to work on some of the conflicts. And at some point, he also went to talk to the people at the City Hall when he was appealing the process of them trying to do some things to him by financially charging him some exorbitant prices and so on. So I want to just give him a chance to talk about how our city government operates, the racism and some of the issues that they deal with people who are trying to maintain their lots and things in their community who may live out of town and so on. So Kamau, welcome to the program. Share a little bit more with the listening audience, the viewing audience, a little bit about yourself.
Basically, as you indicated, I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, on the north side. After I graduated from high school, went to a private high school for 3 years in the state of Iowa. Then I came back to my home state and graduated at UNL in Lincoln, Nebraska, with a bachelor's degree. And after that point, I decided I would like to, and you indicated, but I'll reiterate it, I wanted to live in an area close to where I grew up. I did for a few years have a job as a correctional officer and basically moved to Texas as a final career and hopes to eventually move back to Omaha. And so I purchased the lots near, as you said, my hometown area where I grew up. So that was my initial story. Yes.
Yeah. Now talk to us about this fence thing. You number one, you got the lot, you got a fence, and there was a number of deals you went through over the years. Give us a little background on what some of the things you've dealt with this city hall, and particularly, I'm not sure which department you dealt with, but it was one of those functionary departments that don't have good track record or interact with our community well. Tell me a little bit about what happened to you over the years.
Okay. While I was living here in Omaha, I purchased the lots and I found that there were many times when people would throw trash, things of that nature, debris on my lots. So the city continued to notify me that I had to clean it up, which I understand that. I was out of town. So what I intended to do was I purchased and built a fence around my property. I built a privacy fence so that it was high enough so that that would be a difficult thing for people to throw trash and debris. The city finally came back and sent me a notice that I had to cut the fence down in the front area. I cut it down and I left, went back to Texas. I got a second notice that they needed 33% visibility. That required me to come back to Nebraska, and then I had to remove 33% of the fencing. I went down to the city hall and I asked them why was this necessary. They explained to me that there was a law or there was an ordinance that you must make sure that people coming out of their driveway could see any traffic coming down the street. That's why I had to cut the front area of my fencing down. Well, it happened to be that I have the only driveway on the block. So I didn't worry too much about that because I wasn't using the driveway at the time. So I went down and I explained that to them and they said, well, that's the ordinance. That's how it works. And that's all I got out of them. So I came back and I did what they asked me to do. And after that, I went back to Texas again. But I've gone through this with them over the years in trying to make sure my property was maintained. And no matter what I do to satisfy their requirements, I continue to get letters from them saying that my property is in violation, or in one case, I'll tell you, and then I'll conclude with that portion. They raised my taxes. It was almost $1,000 from 1 year to the next. So I protest that. And when I protested, they explained to me that because the property values, because of the different lots that were being developed, caused the property value to go up. when I actually protested and had an arbitrator hear my side that I had made no improvements on my lot. Then I was able to actually, in one case, I won the protest where they said I didn't have to pay the extra tax amount, and they reduced it back to the regular amount that I pay each year. And that's some of the things I had to go through with the City Hall department in the City Hall building on Farnham.
So people don't have a clue when you said they raised it $1,000. What was the original property tax you paid on the lot that you're talking about?
I paid $60.
And then it rose up to $1,060?
No, yes, it went to $1,000 for the final year. Now, here's the thing. I paid $60 for 2 lots. The lot that they actually said, well, they raised it 1,000 on both lots, and they're on 2 different blocks. But the first lot, I only paid $15 a year. That's the only amount of tax I owe. The other lot was $44. But they raised the value, or they raised the property taxes $1,000 for each property, each for the next year. That's what I protested, and finally they reduced it back to what I paid, and I still pay the original value on the property, which is not even $60 a year for 2 lots.
So that shows you the incompetence and the arrogance of these personalities, because how do you go from paying a small amount and then they jump you up and it's basically still the same empty lot and there's not been any improvements on that lot? So it shows you the capriciousness and arbitrary mentality of these situations. The other thing is, I know you came up recently, you had some problems with cutting the grass. What was the cutting the grass issue was all about?
Well, they and I don't have a problem with them and their guidelines of letting the grass be 12 inches or less. And then I had to come up. They sent me a letter, and I usually receive this every year because if I don't get here before the summer grasses grow, I will get a letter. And the letter states that I have to cut the property. Now, after I come and cut the property, I call them and let them know I've cut it. It's back to what it should be. I've followed the regulations. They still will send me a charge for, they call it a processing fee now. Years ago, we didn't have to pay that, but I believe it was in 2021, they sent the letter and they indicated that anytime they get a complaint or that they have to send a letter to any of the property owners, not only do they have a fine for the processing fee, but the fine is also for whatever the issue is. And in my case, it was the weeds growing too high. So I'd come back every year and I'd cut the property. I'd make sure I'd get the grass cut to whatever they asked for, and then I'd go back to Texas. Subsequently, I'd get a second letter or a third letter that says I still owe for the processing fee. So I would send that to them. And this last incident, which was pertaining to a sidewalk, I was notified in.
Well, before you get to that, let me ask you, how much does the processing fee cost? What are they charging for mailing you an envelope with a letter in it?
It was $105.
So an envelope with a letter in it, they call that a processing fee.
That's the processing fee. And ironically, Jamal, they sent me a letter saying that they cut the grass on a particular date in July of last year. That same date was the 19th of July. I was here in Omaha and I cut both of my lots. So when I arrived in Texas, I called their department and I explained to them that they could not have cut it because I cut it. So I did not owe a fee for the weeds or the litter. Well, the guy called me back about a week later and said, well, we're not going to charge you now for the grass cutting because we do find that you did cut it, we didn't cut it, but we'll still charge you the processing fee. Coincidentally, the fee for cutting the grass and the fee for the processing was both $105.
See, that shows you how we got people who are incompetent, racist, elitist, and just negative and have no business literally hiding behind their offices, pull this kind of crap. And that's when people start to disregard and disrespect some of these public functionaries who do that. Now, go on a little bit more. You were saying, I interrupted you, you were saying something about another incident you had to deal with.
The incident was in reference to a sidewalk. I have made it a habit of coming to Omaha every year, 2 times or more. this particular year, which was in 2021, I was here in June, as I always come for celebration of my father, and in the latter part of the year. Well, in July of 2023, when I arrived back at home from being in Nebraska, I received a letter that said the city construction department, it's the Public Works Department, which has a construction division. They had constructed a sidewalk on my property. I called them and I protested, or they gave me the option of paying the fine or simply protesting. I let them know that I had intended to protest it. They indicated that I would have to come to Omaha to protest, even though I filed the protest through the mail. I sent letters to several departments protesting that I should not be required to pay for a sidewalk that I, number one, did not need on my property, and two, did not authorize them to construct. I received a letter, and then I received a subsequent call from one of their department heads, Sean Gibson, which was in charge of the sidewalk division. He said they had sent me a certified letter. I looked in the code and it showed that that was a requirement, but I also could verify with them that on the date that they said the letter arrived at my home and was delivered, I was actually in Omaha, Nebraska. And I have records to verify, and I did that through the protesting with their city council division the day they had the Board of Equalization hearing. Anyway, after the protest and during the protest, I, I admittedly let them know that there was no way I would have received such a notice because I was not at home, and it was supposed to have been delivered and signed by me, which their records show that they never had a signed certified letter or receipt from me. However, when I spoke to the city council in the hearing, I don't know if each one of them disregarded it.
And when you say city council, you mean it was an equalization? It wasn't the actual city council members, all of them, but it was just different people who part of this protest group, right?
It was, let's see, I could say about 7 of the members.
Were they all city council members, or were they people part of a hearing board?
They were part of the Board of Equalization.
Okay, so then that's not the same as city council. Okay, got
it. It included city council members.
No, was there a black one there?
There was one, Mrs. Johnson.
Oh, Juanita Johnson. Okay, she was on there too. Okay, got you.
Yeah. And there were several more because, and I say it was more city council members than not, because immediately after the Board of Equalization hearing, they went right into the city council meeting, and it was the same people. Because I stayed a few minutes after the hearing just to sit in on the city council members.
Okay, got you. I understand that.
Hearing. But the hearing actually consisted, and as I say it again, more than less city council members. And they heard, I would say, approximately 60 cases regarding sidewalk charges, regarding weed and litter violation charges, regarding they also had a second section of weed and litter violation hearings. So throughout this hearing, we all sat through each other's protests. And let me say this, in sitting through the complete Board of Equalization hearing and listening to all of the different citizens of Omaha, property owners with their protests, not one of the protests were granted.
How many were we talking? How many people were we talking here?
We're talking about 60 hearings.
In the same day?
At the same time, and it was supposed to be 1 hour. It's impossible to hear all of those cases in 1 hour. It took an hour and a half, and that was because the city council member that was the chairman of the hearing, she rushed everyone through the hearing, and they read the hearing, and soon after each one of the protests were read, the board members were all asked to vote. Each one of them denied the
So in other words, it was obvious they had rehearsed what they were going to do. They basically must have met in private, decided everything, and then when they come out in public, it was a done deal, like most of the other meetings are done in city hall and county government.
It was pretty obvious that could have been the gist.
Well, no, it probably is. That's how they operate. They're just it's insulting. They think people are dumb when they come there. You make your appeal, and they already got their minds made up. So it's a waste of time to even protest with these clowns.
And after explaining and making the protest, one of the council members, the Miss Juanita Johnson, said to me that her vote, even though it was the same as everyone else, her vote did not hinder the fact that she expressed compassion for what I had gone through. I'm a cancer survivor, and I went through the treatment, and I explained to them that that was some of the difficulty that I experienced in coming back to Omaha to protest it, but I made it here. She explained that her compassion, and she apologized to me for what I had to go to, and I understood that, but I stopped her in the midst of it and said, what the problem is the hearing personnel, all the council members that voted no, for every one of us Omaha property owners, those members, I said to them at the hearing, I said, the first problem is you have not really considered what our protests are, because it's obvious every one of us have different reasonings, but you denied every protest that was before you in this hearing. And I said, it's very sad that we have to be subjected to that from you as city council members, that you really don't care. And some of them did not experience what some of the property owners experienced in going through the protest and being charged. So after the hearing, it was quite obvious that it was either rehearsed, it was already decided that every protest would be denied. And that's what each of us property owners there in the hearing had to experience.
Well, you know, in the community, we know that when you go down to city hall and county government, there are a bunch of kangaroo court behaviors they go through. Most of the people who work in city hall are white. They don't have diversity on a decent level. The couple of token Negroes they have down there, they have no voice. They have no written correspondence to show that they're spoken on behalf of us. And I even question the aspect of district elections, because for some reason we have these people who get downtown and they turn against our community, but that's another story. I want to spend a lot of time on that one. But I want to ask you a different question is, when you wrote those letters to protest or whatever, did you ever get written correspondence from city officials each time you wrote a letter? Did they write back to you?
There was only two. The first one was the city council member, Juanita Johnson. And the letter she said to me was, I'm going to pass this concern on to another party. And after that point, I never received anything else from her. The second person that contacted me was just one of the city clerks. And all she did was inform me that the hearing was scheduled for a particular date and that I was required to come if I wanted to protest. They did give me an option that if I wanted to have someone else stand in for me, that was acceptable. But in such a short notice, and the cost of the sidewalk that they had charged me, which was over $1,000, I felt it in my best interest to come and protest it personally myself.
So you had to pay $1,000 for a sidewalk that you didn't get. They didn't give permission for you to build. And number two, they probably got some buddies and cronies that they got some little organizations they kick back with. And I say that very seriously because I don't know any people of color who work for the city who put sidewalks in under these kind of constraints or whatever. So it's just like the towing thing. You know, they got all these inbuilt people who they have little cronyism with and so on. But $1,000 for a sidewalk, I know people can do a sidewalk a lot cheaper. It was, you know, again, I suspect it's a regular sidewalk that's, you know, like the regular size, not a gigantic sidewalk.
No, exactly. And I explained to them in the protest, there was no, none of us had any video evidence that there was a need for a sidewalk, let alone the length that they actually constructed it on my property. There was no pictures that they showed me that showed there was damage, because the complete area of the sidewalk had litter and debris on top of it. So after they constructed it, they went along and cleaned both sides of the sidewalk that they constructed to show, in an effort to say, look, this is what we constructed, and we can charge $1,095.63 for it. So that's the only thing I got from them. And that's what required me to protest it at that time.
So, I know we're chasing time, but I want to ask you a different question, kind of a different one. I know you bought these lots years ago. Did you ever think about selling these lots, or not going through all this drama each year? Would you go through? And as I understand you, there's more than one lot here. So has that other lot gotten some of the same kind of harassment for you as this major one here?
This one is the only one that I actually go through the harassment and the constant notification that there is a violation of some kind. And I am quite aware, and I don't think the city is concerned or even cares about why the violations occur. Um, I have certainly thought about selling the lots, but that to me would be giving up on the city when I know the city is doing things such as, you might even know it yourself. They're practicing things that would lead you to believe that they're in effect trying to go through this process of gentrification and causing those that grew up in the area to move out and then change the environment by constantly levying fees, levying charges, finding violations. And then one occasion, I actually wrote in the letter to let them know it appears as if they're targeting my property or the properties on the north side because they don't live on the north side. Most of the people that sat on the council, it is evident that they are probably not one that grew up on the north side to know some of the challenges that you might face. So I thought about it, yes, but I decided I bought it for the purpose of moving back at some point in my lifetime to the area in which I grew up. And that's what I think Jamal made me decide I'm not going to sell the property, even though I go through the harassment and the difficulty with the city hall and the city construction and public works department. That's been the biggest headache. And I've decided I'll just endure the headache because of what I had planned to do from the start.
So let me ask you, have there been anybody who made you an offer on your property? How much money did they offer you? Was there somebody offer you some money on the property? Was it both of them or one of them?
I get letters for one of them on a regular basis. In fact, I got one today, but there's never an actual dollar amount offering for my property. It's always we'll buy it for you or from you for cash. And I've always just most of the time tore it up. Every now and then I'll respond to that person that I'm not interested in selling at this time. That is my decision to keep the property.
So one of the questions as we're getting closer to the end is what recommendations would you have for elected or public officials, or particularly some of the public functionaries in City Hall to stop this harassment or incompetent behavior by doing what they're doing? What can you say to them to stop giving this kind of targeting or this gentrification? And again, many of us know it's part of their white supremacy, but talk to me a little about what would you say to them?
I would first of all tell them I'd come down and visit those citizens that live in these communities that you're sending notices that they have to do this and do that, take care of this. Come down and visit them to see the connection that the people have to the communities that they live in. And then perhaps they would understand, and that's kind of a long shot, they would understand that these properties are really very important to the people, the community, their descendants, and the people that will continue this property and take care of the property. Don't just try to do things that would move them out because you don't live in that area and you don't care about who lives there because it's not where you live. I would suggest you come down and visit with the property owners, the ones that live in these homes. And I'm talking about the people that had lived here years and years, not some of the residents that are just moving in. And you can tell by the nature of the community in 2024 as compared to 1982.
Well, I know we're getting down the lines, but one thing I will say is when I worked in county government, I could tell that many of the white supremacy mentality people or functionaries never visit North or South Omaha. I could tell by the way they behaved and
Yeah.
talked. They had no contact with the people they were supposed to serve, almost like they lived behind plexiglasses and they expect everybody to come down to their building to come to their hearings. The same with the Omaha Plantation school boards. They don't come out in our community. They don't engage us. They don't do any of that. And when they do, it's like they got an armored patrol and they're scared to interact with citizens that they garnish their property tax every year. And again, they have nothing returned. They don't hire us. You look at the human resource offices, and they
Yeah.
don't have numbers to show how many people of color they hire. And when they do, they hire maybe some profile personality. They put it in a corner and put on a dunce hat and have them just sit around and become a bobblehead. But I will ask one last two questions. One is, what advice would you have for citizens who want to protest this equalization and this farcical kind of process you go through? What can we do, and should other people go through what you do to be an advocate for their land? What would you say to the citizens or residents of North Omaha when they have to encounter what you did?
First of all, they need to actually write letters, and not only write letters to the council people, but write letters to their senators and write letters to the governor, and keep these letters coming so they know that this is a very important, a very poignant issue with the people in those communities, that we're being harassed by fees and fines, and sometimes so exorbitant that many of us cannot pay. That would be one of the things I would suggest they would do. And then come down as a group, come down as a, let me say, as a mob to some of the city council meetings, listen to them, and the city council meetings allegedly say you have a voice and you can speak at those meetings. Perhaps if we would come down more often and we would speak, even as you're doing, Jamal, to the point that a lot of these actions are racist actions. Help us in that regard. I would suggest we would get more involved in it, and that way we could probably affect some change at this juncture in time.
You know, I find it ironic how you said the one lot you've got no negativity, no feedback, nothing on. This other lot, and I don't know if Habitat with their racist self is behind some of this, but I do know you got these white liberal, great white saviors programs that are around here building these slab inferior houses. And then I heard through the grapevine they start kind of collaborating with Tyson Food and some of these other corporations. And instead of helping the grassroots, they're helping folks who, you know, basically don't have social capital history in our community. But again, it's kind of a crazy thing that's going on in our neighborhoods. And we got a lot of people who got bent necks looking the other way. We are down to the last question, but any closing comments you have for our viewing audience today, Kamau?
I would say, Jamal, you really have hit it on the head, that nail that is very, very painful to our community, that many of the people that our government have sponsored and really helped to come into our communities have displaced some of us that have been longtime residents. We grew up in this community. I would say you have said most of the things that were needed to be said at this time. We just need to keep saying it, and I do know that as we keep saying it, eventually we can make some changes, because the racism is still very, very noticeable. It's very, very overt. It's not very sublime. So we need to address it and hit it head on in order to make changes in our community and for our children to come after us.
You know, I know we're going to close out. I know I really appreciate you being here, able to talk to us and share this with our audience and so on. But I do know that one of the challenges we will face, as long as you have the gatekeepers and the filters who have no history, no connections, and don't even know anything about our experience in key positions, like the City of All Human Relations Department, that's a joke. The Chief Diversity Officer at UNO, Willie Nelson lookalike, he's not going to be advocating for African Americans in Omaha. He has no social capital or history in our community. So as long as we keep allowing these certified carpetbaggers to come off in our neighborhoods and community and control the plantation, is again, that's what it looks like, the way we get treated by these outsiders. You got OPPD that has no sense of community engagement, MUD, all of them are a bunch of folks who just can care less about our community by the lack of their investments and their even social relationship with our people. That's part of the problem. So really appreciate you being on, Kamau, and hopefully we can have you back again to talk about some of your other ordeals. And I know that Texas can be rough on a lot of Black folks, but Omaha and Nebraska is moving up in there to do some of the same things. Nebraska's starting to look more like Florida and Texas, and I think we keep importing these neo-Confederate personalities or these daughters of Confederacy to run these organizations, feel like they're friends of ours, and we got to continue to call them out. As they say, name it and claim it, but just at the end of the day, speak truth to power. Because at the end of the day, there's been a tremendous amount of trauma that they continue to create in our community because they don't like the color of our skin. And it's hard to find a Black man working in a key position in many of these nonprofits and organizations, especially a Black man with a spine. We have a lot of people who have spines of jellyfish and so on, as Senator Chamber call them, but we again got to call it for what it is. So thank you for being on our program today, and hopefully we'll get an opportunity to bring you back and talk about some of your other experience and maybe what it's like to deal with some of those rednecks in Texas, because I know they run down there quickly like they run here.
Exactly.
Take care.
Thank you, man.
Appreciate it. Appreciate
Thank
it. Hope you enjoyed this edition of Throwing Down Some Heavy Light. Join us for another edition where we talk about the craziness that goes on in our white supremacy city hall and county commission type organizations that don't serve our people in a comprehensive and collective way. As we always say, Barocco.